Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Reasonable Doubt, brought to you by the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association. I'm your host, Jimmy Ardwan, along with my co-host, as always, Julio Vela. Julio, what's going on, my friend?
You know, same old, good day with this panel. Totally pumped and excited. A lot of great topics.
We got a full panel tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Let's start by introducing everybody. First, to my left, we have Jason Miller with Houston Normal. Jason, welcome back to the program.
Glad to be back on.
And we have two first-time guests on this show, attorneys Alan Macias. Alan?
Thanks for having me.
You
Appreciate
bet.
it.
And Erik Nelson.
Yeah, great to be here.
It's a good. We're able to get a five-person show tonight.
I'm pumped. A lot of stuff to talk about. A lot of different perspectives.
Whole lot of stuff to talk about. We promise it won't be fake news and full of leaks and all that sort of stuff.
It has to be fake news with some of the things that are going on. But I swear it's not.
How can the leaks be real and the news be fake?
You know what was so surprising to me is that the Mr. President seemed more concerned about how the leak got out than what his guy was doing in the first place.
Well, and he was pretty enthusiastic about leaks when they were against Clinton, and now he's up there, he's so mad. Oh, how could someone leak? Well,
I know. Not really on the scheduled topics for tonight's show, but we digress nonetheless.
Great topics, though. Great topics.
Definitely.
Believe me, they're great topics.
We'll be with you for the next. It may not be as fun as the press conference that happened today, but we'll be here for the next hour talking about criminal justice issues. And we will open up the phone line starting up around 8:30, so you can jump in the conversation. 713-807-1794 is the number. We'll also have Twitter up, so you can send me your questions right here at HCCLA_TV. And, let's jump right in, guys. The big announcement today, obviously, that has received both praise and high criticism was the announcement. And it kind of started, I guess, yesterday. We heard rumblings of what HPD was going to be introducing with a cite and release program, but really what it was a combination of the DA's office, HPD, and all the law enforcement within Harris County about a cite and release program for marijuana cases under 4 ounces. Essentially, and I've been in trial, so if I'm getting bits and parts of this and trying to catch up to it, so if I have any part of it incorrect, please jump in and stop me. But from what I understand, if you are arrested and you have 4 ounces or less of marijuana on you, the police are basically going to seize it, they're going to take it down to the station. They'll put it and hold it with a little note. It says so-and-so was caught with this, and then they won't even really they call it a cite and release, but it's not a citation. It's go take some classes, and if you don't take the classes and turn in your homework, then we'll file on you. Is that the gist of what I get of it?
So, for those here, is it catch and release? Is it sign and release? Is it sign and acknowledge? What is this?
It's a pre-charge diversion program. So similar to a pre-trial diversion, this is a pre-charge diversion. And we've had this under District Attorney Devin Anderson as well. This was introduced a couple years ago where the person is not charged with a crime. They're diverted prior to being charged. So they take an educational class within 90 days. Once they take the class, the issue is put to rest. It's said and done. So that's an improvement over the previous program, which had like a 60-day probationary period. So under this program, once the class is done, it's over. There's no more.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't there an actual arrest under the old program? I mean, you were actually physically taken into custody. Under this program, I understand you're not going to be placed in cuffs.
Right. Under the previous program, there were some instances where there were not an arrest as well.
Okay.
So,
I think one of the big virtues of this one is that the DA said it doesn't matter how many times you've been arrested for weed. It's not a first offenders only kind of program.
Just across the board.
Just across the board. If you have less than 4 ounces of marijuana, you don't go to jail. You don't even get a citation really, because nothing goes on the record. Mm-hmm. You get told to take a class, and as long as you do it, it goes away. It's not going to affect your FAFSA. It's not going to affect your immigration status. None of that kind of stuff.
Alan, what have you seen? Do you see a lot of misdemeanor marijuanas, and on those individuals? Is there a record of them when they come to court, or is it a true as it stands now, kind of no record kind of deal?
As it currently stands, there is a record. And the reason they do that is because, at least from what I've been told, they're not supposed to get multiple chances to divert for a marijuana charge. Now, I think under the new system that, like Erik was saying, will be completely different. But under the previous program, kind of like what you were talking about, only the sheriff's office and HPD were doing the cite and release or class and release, like pre-arrest diversion, whereas now it sounds like I think there's like 37 law enforcement entities around Harris County. Everybody's going to be participating, so that's going to be a lot less people in the jail and help a lot more people out.
I mean, 4 ounces is a lot of weed, guys.
That's like 2 pockets, man. That's like 2 pockets of weed.
Well, I think that depends on how tight your pants are. You know?
Oh,
Some of these
I
hipster
wear
kids
tight
probably
pants.
can't
I
wear
wear
too
tight
much weed in
pants.
them.
He does wear tight pants.
What says you, Eric? Good idea, bad idea?
Well, I mean, we're kind of biased on this panel. I think we've got a member of NORML and then a bunch of members of the criminal defense community. But I think it just is a good idea. It's not the kind of thing, Kim Ogg ran on a platform of marijuana reform or of low-level criminal drug reform, and she's delivering. No one gets hurt with weed. It frees up officers' time to go out and do the real things. But the interesting thing is, because it's not actually changing the law, it's still PC. So if your guy gets pulled over,
bring that up, yeah.
if your guy gets pulled over and they smell marijuana, they can still search your car.
Absolutely.
They can still do anything else. They find other kinds of drugs, weapons, anything else. They're still good on PC court.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to roll dirty, just roll with the weed.
So
Don't have the Xanax, don't have, your whatever else in there, just have the weed.
So hold on. No, they can't arrest me for this joint, so they don't know about anything. They can't get into my car. They can't do that.
Yeah, but it doesn't change.
But why? What?
Because it doesn't change the fact that a smell of marijuana is PC. Just because Harris County is choosing not to prosecute it, that doesn't change what the case law says, that a smell of marijuana, odor of marijuana is enough for a police officer to go in, and start to inquire and potentially search a vehicle.
Yeah, it's still evidence of a crime.
Right.
It's just an evidence of a crime that our DA's decided not to prosecute.
What says you, Alan?
I think it'll be interesting to see how this program works when people are on a deferred or if they're on some sort of community supervision.
Yeah.
Will they still be revoked for that violation? Because even though we're saying there's no record of it, there still kind of is, right? I mean, HPD or the sheriff's office, somebody's going to have a record of an arrest or a stop or a detention even. So how's that going to work? And then we're still going to see marijuana cases when there's an accompanying felony, I believe. When there's a companion, let's say an evading in a motor vehicle, they find 3.5 ounces of weed in the trunk. I'm sure that's still going to get charged because of the dual nature of the case.
Well, and interestingly, they said that they're going to keep the weed and keep a little note on it saying you got to turn in your homework. So there's a record there that it exists. So if you don't do it, they're going to come prosecute you. So somewhere in someone's footlocker is a record that you have been caught with this marijuana. So it's possible that officer gives that information to your probation officer. Now, you've definitely violated the terms and conditions of your probation. You were possessed of an illegal narcotic. So I think it's going to vary court to court as to which judge is going to do what.
It's also possible that given the state of evidence collection and maintenance in this county, that the various law enforcement that those little pieces of paper just disappear.
Yeah, and so does the
nether.
marijuana.
Right.
Well, I think the idea
Exactly.
is that the documentation of the incident, along with the marijuana that was seized, that's kept in case they don't take the class. If they don't take the class, then they get charged. But once they take the class, that's supposed to be destroyed. The record of it and the seized marijuana itself is destroyed at that point. And with people on deferred adjudication, the program doesn't even apply to them. So they're not even going to be eligible for that program. It excludes certain things like if you're caught in a school zone or if you're caught in a correctional facility or something like that, it doesn't apply to you.
What do you know about this class? Because is this just going to be like we go watch the "Don't do drugs, just say no" kind of videos that they showed us?
There will be a brand
elementary
new
school.
HCCLA, Vela.com. For a certain fee, you can watch the class online, stream it, and print it out, and take it to court. No, I guess you don't even go to court.
No.
Who are you turning this stuff into, and where do you take the class?
Yeah.
Yeah, is there going to be a compliance officer at HCSO that checks your paperwork against the weed and then destroys it eventually?
And in the meantime, are you paying a compliance officer pretrial supervision fees at $40 or $60 a month?
No, you're paying $150 for the class. And it's 4 hours. It doesn't require a drug test. You just go for 4 hours and it's done.
Wow.
Okay, so you physically have to show up. This isn't something like defensive driving where you
No,
go
you
online.
physically show up.
Okay.
And it's a lot better than some of these other pretrial diversion programs we've had in the past. A lot of times they'll require that you go into treatment. And sometimes you get caught with a little bit of marijuana and they're going to require you to go to like 40 hours worth of Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, which is just completely pointless. And it
So what says you? Good deal or bad deal?
definitely a good deal. This is about the best we could hope for coming from law enforcement, given the current laws that we have. And this has the support of the entire law enforcement community of the Harris County, the police chief, the sheriff. Everybody's on board, the mayor's on board. So I think this is going to be a big success and very good for the people of Harris County. However, it's not decriminalization. There's a bill that will decriminalize that's currently being debated in the legislature. And today was a big day for law enforcement in Texas coming out in support of marijuana reform, because not only was there the press conference out of the DA's office, there was another press conference in Austin in support of the civil penalties bill, where police officers, former district judge, a whole lot of people in the law enforcement community were speaking out in favor of changing the laws and enacting the civil penalty.
Now, Jason, I think just about every term someone files a decriminalization or legalization bill, does this one have a better shot? I mean, I know there's been some interesting grounds. I know there's a conservative lawmaker that wanted to make it legal because it's a product of God and you can't make God's products illegal, but I think that one kind of failed.
This is a product of God.
Well, he made all the plants.
What do you think? What says you?
So is it better
I think
this time?
cannabis is a gift, and I think a lot of people can benefit from it therapeutically, medicinally, creatively. There's a whole lot of different things that people can benefit from this plant, and it just doesn't make sense to be clubbing people over the head, throwing them in jail cells for using something that is a natural part of the earth. But to answer your question, I believe that the civil penalties bill this session has a lot more support and is going to go much further. One of the reasons why is because the author of the bill, Representative Joe Moody, is chair of the Criminal Jurisprudence Committee, the committee that the bill was referred to. So he's definitely going to bring forth a hearing. It has bipartisan support. We have one of the co-authors is Jason Isaacs out of Dripping Springs, who's a Republican. It has the support of the Young Republicans Club, a lot of bipartisan support. So I think it's going to go much further. Will it pass this session or pass the next session? We'll have to see, but it's definitely got some traction.
The Republicans like their weed too.
They do. They smoke it in their high rises and just kick it. How do you think the policy will be implemented over time? Do you think it would be implemented over time fairly, or do you see any problems down the road?
I see a problem with kind of validating bad police work, right? I mean, as criminal defense lawyers, we're kind of the check on the, whether a stop has probable cause, reasonable suspicion, where they search legally. And so now these officers are going to be, well, I found the weed, take the class, and you really can't argue with taking a 4-hour class to not have a case filed against you, right? But aren't we reinforcing maybe bad search and seizure techniques or bad stops,
What do you think?
I'm a little worried, certainly about that, but I'm a little worried about the way that it's going to be influenced with other programs that people are involved in. So people are going to say, look, I heard the announcement, weed is not decriminalized, but I'm not going to get in trouble for it. So then my client who takes a probation, or my client who takes a deferred or a pretrial diversion, or is on bond conditions, for example, pretrial bond conditions, gets out on a pretrial bond, gets their life back. It says, okay, well, it's okay to smoke weed in Harris County, and then gets caught with this marijuana. Even if they don't necessarily get charged with it, if anyone in the criminal justice system finds out about it, depends on their judge, they could still have all the same consequences.
Well, I mean, it's similar to what's happening in the NFL. In that in the NFL, we've seen a number of states legalize marijuana completely, and so you have teams in those states where the players, criminally they're not responsible, but they're subject to a collective bargaining agreement that if they're drug tested and they test positive for marijuana, the league can suspend them. They can suspend them without pay. And on certain, with certain people, like what we saw what happened with Ricky Williams, I mean, get tossed out of the league.
Well, there's
after.
a lot of reform efforts going on within the NFL
Sure.
to change the NFL policy, and they actually came down and spoke at Revention Music Center during the Super Bowl week and talked about that. That was very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's the interesting dynamic here because you have so much other stuff that although now they're not going to prosecute this, it's still, like you said, how does this play out? I mean, it's good in theory, but I want to see what happens in practice.
I think what's going to happen is they're going to stop old Joe Smith blowing down with a joint on the street or in his backyard. Cops are just going to say, that's old Joe Smith smoking weed. It's fine. It's a joint. I got his sack last week, and it's been choice. But then go and see Alan Macias or Gilberto Huerta Rodriguez or James Smith, who's black, and be like, hey, same thing's going on. He's smoking a joint. Let's go talk to him. Let's go figure out what's going on with him. And I think it's going to play into stereotypes. I think it's going to play into investigating blacks and Mexicans and minorities. I think it's going to go into profiling individuals a bit more.
We have all of that at a much worse degree under Prohibition than we're going to have under a program like this. I mean, under Prohibition, you see that all the time, and it's really bad. I think this is going to greatly improve, and it's going to reduce that. Of course, there's going to be individual officers who profile people, but it's not going to be as bad as a Prohibition policy where they're enforcing it with full force of the law. What really shocked me today, or actually yesterday, was hearing some of the criticism that came out. Before the program was even announced, we had people, most notably Montgomery County District Attorney Brett Ligon, coming out and criticizing the program before the details were announced. And the things that he said were just ridiculous. He accused Kim Ogg of focusing on marijuana legalization when it has nothing to do with legalization. The program hadn't even been announced. So read the program, look at what it actually is. It's a pre-charge diversion program, and it's not decriminalization or legalization at all. So there were a lot of things where he was just kind of talking about these spewing these reefer madness talking points.
Well, and so the interesting thing, I mean, I don't know, but getting back to kind of circling back to the Colorado and other states discussion, you know what happened in Colorado was you saw, for instance, Kansas, who is a very conservative state, they really started cracking down on the border on their own citizens who were going into Colorado and coming back. And so you had a number of people that Kansas basically said, we're not going to enable this. You people that go over across the state line and go get weed in Colorado and try and bring it back here, we're going to come down on you hard. I mean, it sounds to me that's what Brett Ligon is trying to say, kind of beware if you step out of Montgomery County and go down to that bastion of reefer madness, if you will.
He basically said that Harris County is going to be a sanctuary for dope smokers.
Yeah.
Well, look, I don't know any marijuana users who are lining up ready to forfeit their stash and take a 4-hour class.
Well, and not only that, but if you're looking, but if you are into weed, Harris County is not where you're going for your sanctuary. You're going to Colorado. You're going to Washington. You're not saying, oh, I'm running to Harris County. Like,
I think
what? Come on.
I practice a reasonable amount up in Montgomery County, out of the Woodlands, and I joke with my law partner that there's two parties in Montgomery County. There's the Republican Party and there's the Conservative Party, which is just more conservative than the regular Republicans. There's really no Democrats up there. So Brett Ligon realizes that it's a consequence-free play for him.
He's pandering to his base.
Plays right to his base.
think so, or
He gets
do
to
you
beat
think-
up on people that don't really
He's
care.
trying to score political points.
Or does he really believe that?
But see, I think he really believes it. And you say he's pandering his political points, but you know what? I gotta say, I don't think that's necessarily true, because I think there's a lot of people. I mean, look, it's suburbia out there. It's the Woodlands. What do you have a lot of out in suburbia? You have a lot of teenagers, and you have a lot of teenagers who, I'm sure a lot of these kids at Woodlands High and everywhere else, they could sure as hell benefit from a law like this, from a prosecutor like this who kind of said, you know what, maybe we don't need to saddle kids with going through a deferred adjudication or a conviction for marijuana and screw up their entire lives.
The other thing
that's
is
not who
this
votes.
this program.
Maybe
but their
that's not who
parents
votes.
vote.
Well,
but their
and they
parents
already,
vote. And you know what? And
they
their
already
parents
get that though, Jimmy.
Huh?
They already get that though. If you're a Woodlands teenager with money from the Woodlands and you
Right.
get charged with weed, you're getting a pretrial diversion, probably. If you got a good lawyer, if you don't have a big record.
Well, this program
I can
doesn't
tell you,
apply to
I'm
juveniles
done.
anyway. Juveniles in Harris County are still going to, high school students are still going to have the same diversion programs that juveniles currently have. This program does
But if
not
you're
apply to
17,
juveniles.
if you're 17, you're not a juvenile and you're still in high school.
Yeah,
And you're going to be prosecuted as an adult. And guess what? If you're 17, you're right on the cusp of going to college. And if you can't, and guess what? If you can't leave the state because you're on deferred for a year for marijuana, and you get an offer to go to college on a scholarship to, God forbid, Oklahoma or Wisconsin
or
or
you
somewhere.
can't get
I
student
like the
loans.
Badgers. I like the Badgers.
Or you can't get student loans because you can't get a FAFSA approved because
Right.
you've got a deferred for weed, which the
Exactly.
federal government counts as a conviction.
Exactly.
Did the viewers hear that? Can you just look in the camera and let the viewers know?
So if you have a marijuana conviction or a deferred adjudication, it can disqualify you. And I'm not an education lawyer, but I know that it can disqualify you from getting federal student loans. And a deferred counts as a conviction for basically all purposes in federal law. So immigration, student loans, all that kind of stuff.
Well, and I don't think what people understand is if you get a deferred, you are on a form of community supervision. If you want to transfer your probation to another state, which if you're going to college out of state, you're going to be living in another state for 9 months out of the frickin' year, you have to get that other state to accept you under the Uniform Compact, the Interstate Compact Act.
And only certain ones comply with that.
Right.
So you think Ligon is making the wrong choices by coming out like this against Hogg?
I just think he looks like an idiot.
Well, that's just like visually. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean both?
It's
right.
going to hurt. This is going to hurt him politically. He's trying to score political points and pander to his base, but also he is a prohibitionist. He does believe what he's saying. But whenever Devin Anderson had a similar pre-charge diversion program, he was silent. He didn't say anything. Now a Democrat is announcing it, and all of a sudden he's up in arms about it. So he is trying to score political points. But I think ultimately, when he's up for re-election, I think whoever his primary opponent is, he's going to get criticized for this, and it is going to affect him politically worse than the points he's trying to score.
Hey, okay, so let me put this. He's the prosecutor. Prosecutors have an ethical duty or not, or what is their duty? Should they follow the law? One of his arguments is the law is the law is the law is the law.
Well, their duty is to seek justice. Let's be honest. What their ethical duty is, it's to seek justice. And is it justice to mete out a punishment on somebody and potentially prevent them from going to the college of their choice or prevent them from getting financial aid from going to college over a bag of weed?
What says you?
I don't think.
Well,
I don't think that's pursuing justice, in my opinion.
The motto of the DA's office, it's a culture up there. The motto there is, let justice be done though the heavens fall, which they take to mean, let's hammer people as hard as we can because that's what we think we should do. So I don't think, and I know, in fact, that making arguments like this is a good kid who can't go to college, we should get rid of their marijuana, it's a tough sell there. And
Sure.
and the problem is that their juries back them up. So they're not making offers that are unreasonable that they're going to lose later at trial. It's a tougher trial.
I think what people need to understand is that someone who's caught with a small amount of cannabis in their possession, they're not doing other drugs, they're not committing other crimes, it's just simply possessing the plant substance, and that's all they're accused of. Those people aren't doing anything wrong. They're not doing anything morally wrong. They're just possessing something the government doesn't want them to possess. And that's all that they're doing. So people need to understand that those people who aren't necessarily doing something morally wrong, they are being kidnapped by government agents and locked in cages. And it's happening to thousands of people every year.
Aren't those people
That needs to
supporting
stop.
terrorism, supporting gangs, and supporting the influx of drugs and the corruption of the youth?
The law enforcement are the ones supporting terrorism by enforcing prohibition and allowing the criminals to profit from the marketplace instead of allowing legitimate businesses to profit. Now, decriminalization is not the answer, though. And I want to really stress that just decriminalizing it is not the answer, because you still have a black market under decriminalization. You don't have any restrictions on youth access. You don't have a storefront. You don't have consumer protections. So the solution to the problem is to end prohibition and to have a legal marketplace with legitimate businesses who are paying taxes, investing in the economy, investing in the stock market, creating jobs, checking IDs, with consumer protections in place, like we have in Colorado. That's what we need to have here. So decriminalization is not a solution. It's a step. It'll save people a lot of hardship and a lot of misery that they're experiencing when they get arrested, but it's not the solution to the overall problem, which is the prohibition and the black market.
Boom.
Is this, in fact, increasing the black market? In the sense that, okay, Houston, people can walk around with a joint and just do a class.
No, I think the same. Whether you decriminalize or legalize, the same amount of people are smoking marijuana. And they'll talk about, well, now that it's legal, people are going to be driving under the influence. People are driving under the influence of marijuana right now, under prohibition. So when you change the laws, that does not encourage use. We have the same amount of people using it. So the black market is going to be about the same. The difference is, where does the money go? Does it go to criminals or does it go to legitimate businesses?
Like Whataburger.
I'm generally on
Goes to
your side.
Whataburger.
Yeah.
Where it goes.
I'm on your side, Jason,
Proportional.
but in Colorado, would you say, I mean, you're normal, so you probably have looked at specifically at the data more than I have. Has the usage rate or occurrence rate increased, decreased, stayed the same? I mean, there's always stories about how much money they're making off of marijuana sales.
They make $1
You got to
billion.
assume it's gone up now that you can't get arrested.
Right. Well, there's two things you have to look at. Some of the prohibitionists will use this data to their advantage, and they'll say, well, more young people are smoking marijuana in Colorado than they are in Texas. Well, yeah, that's true. But prior to legalization, that was also true. People in that state were using it more frequently than other states before it was legal. So when you look at from one state to the other, yes, there's a difference. When you look at prior to legalization versus after legalization, it's about the same in Colorado. You don't see an increase in youth access after legalization. You do see, however, an increase in usage among senior citizens, which I think is a good thing. So people in states that marijuana is just more accepted, they legalize first. So that's where that data comes from. But when you look at prior to legalization, it was still about the same as it is now.
I mean, that seems like you're comparing Mexican food consumption in Texas versus
Right, exactly.
Illinois.
I take offense to that.
Huh?
I take offense to that.
Okay.
Just saying.
Are you offended because people in Illinois shouldn't eat that Mexican food?
Yeah,
It
exactly.
sucks?
I take offense to that.
Are you offended at the fact that Illinois would be the one that I pick as a comparison for Mexican food?
Okay, so is there or are there plans like this that are for Harris County, for example, that are going on in the legislature right now? Are there bills introduced that are similar to this? Do you know of any?
There's a civil penalties bill, which is House Bill 81, that I was talking about earlier, with authored by Joe Moody, and it is co-authored by Jason Isaacs, I believe. And that's a civil penalty where it's up to 1 ounce, and all you do is you just pay a fine. It's a civil fine. It's no longer a criminal charge at all. This program is different. The diversion program, it doesn't change the law. You're still threatened with a criminal charge. It just doesn't get filed as long as you complete the class. But if you fail to complete the class, there's still that criminal charge. There's still that criminal element. What we need to do in the legislature as a first step is to make it a civil fine for a small amount, so there's no criminal charge being threatened against you whatsoever. And then eventually we need to have a fully comprehensive medical marijuana program, so people who need it most, for medicinal purposes, can access it. But the end game is, and this is inevitable, this is going to happen, is for prohibition to be over with in Texas altogether, and to have a legitimate marketplace, so we can have a program that allows us to raise money and improve the economy and just come to our senses. It's going to happen all over the country. So
we're going to open up the phone lines now, so if you want to call in and join our conversation, 713-807-1794 is the number. The Twitters are kind of dead this evening, so you can hit us up there too, at HCCLA_TV. I wonder, guys, on this, before we kind of move on to some of the other topics I want to cover, but one last thought on this. We've talked before on this program about how THC oil prosecutions are treated way differently than just regular marijuana. Does this, you think, begin to see the ability to get pretrial diversions and easier treatment on the felony THC cases? I mean, if they're not even prosecuting Class A possession of marijuana cases, why are they going to be really going hard on THC oil cases?
Or the dude who has the brownie or the cookie. So for the panel, to dovetail, all right, so what's the difference between having a cookie and a dime bag and oil, which is, I guess, super, it's no plant, it's no food, it's oil. And you smoke hashish, maybe? What's the difference between the three? From a lawyer perspective, and then from an individual who knows the legislature game and some experience in that realm. What do you says you?
Well, I think that probably the difference is just what a bunch of conservative legislators thought about it and what they were sold by some advocates who were trying to make it a super crime or had a position in the matter. I think there is no difference, right? It's a dose of the same amount of chemicals or a similar amount of chemicals. So from a difference between the two, same.
What about legally, Alan?
I think there was a case pretty recently, maybe a year or two ago, out in West Texas, where a young man was found with 10 pounds of marijuana brownies, and there was very little weed per brownie. But because the law says, you have to weigh it together, it put him in the 5 to 99 range of punishment. So it can, if as a lawyer, you're praying that for just the regular weed and not the brownies or whatnot, your client can wind up facing a whole lot of time just because he likes to eat pot.
Well, here's the issue on that, and this is something people really need to understand, is that when it comes to concentrates, like THC concentrated into an edible form or an oil form, or even just a concentrated form for a vaporizer or something, this is a situation where people are using the product in a way that's not as detrimental to their health as smoking it. So especially like people with that use it medicinally, they don't want to smoke it. They don't like to smoke it. They will use an edible form instead. But then we have the situation where the smokable marijuana flower, the natural flower, is being diverted pre-charge, and the concentrated form of marijuana, which is actually less health risks because you're not smoking it, those people are being charged with felonies. We had a case where a grandfather was coming to visit his terminally ill granddaughter who was 20 years old, suffering from stage 3 cancer, and brought in some brownies and is being charged with felony. He came out to our meeting and talked about what his granddaughter was going through. So the edible forms, while they're not as bad for your health because you're not smoking it, they're getting hit with felonies. So that's an important thing that needs to be addressed.
I mean, it seems like to me it's very similar. Well, it is similar to the disparity that happened in the federal system under crack and regular and powder cocaine.
Absolutely.
It's the exact same thing. It's the exact same problem all over again, and they realized it on the federal level.
So what you're saying is object to the sentencing disparity so you can preserve error in the future if the law ever changes?
I mean, I think you have to. I really do. But I wonder if the DA's office will take notice of that disparity, and actually, I mean, if the DA's office, if Kim Ogg is astute enough to realize I shouldn't be prosecuting these cases and we should divert them around the system, then I gotta think that she's gonna say, I recognize that there is a disparity in punishment in the way the legislature has done this, and I'm going to do something about it. I mean, she has the power to do it. Why would she not do it? I mean, it seems, at least I'm optimistic. I mean, I would think that she should do that. If she's not going to prosecute Class A and Class B, then it seems consistent that you would take a less harsh stance against the oils and the edibles.
And baby steps.
We'll talk
Right.
to her about that. I think she's going to take things step by step.
I think that because of the advent of edibles have always been around. Everybody's been cooking brownies in their oven for years. It's been going on. But the idea that now some states have edibles and things that are readily available, we've seen, at least I have, more cases of edible cases in Texas. So
I mean, if you're like Bill Clinton and you don't like to inhale, it's the perfect stuff.
Yeah, right.
You know?
And so you'd like to think, though, that the high school student or college student who's bringing back a brownie from the road trip back to Colorado, who's not driving, not doing anything crazy, isn't any more culpable or committing any more of a criminal act than the individual who has a dime bag. And the fact that they're treated so differently is upsetting.
You know, Jimmy, I think that reference might have been older than some of our viewers tonight.
I agree. I agree. I'm dating myself. Back when MTV actually played music videos.
So, Kim Mogg's going to divert all these marijuana cases. Saving money, taxpayers are not saving money.
Well, if you listen to her and look at her charge, she thinks
Saving
it's gonna
millions.
What was it, $26 million?
26 million.
You know what they should do with that $26 million? They should stop paying that stupid lawyer who's making those ridiculous arguments to the federal judge.
Let's get into that next.
All right,
Let's take a phone call and we'll touch on that topic next. Hello, thanks for calling Reasonable Doubt.
Hello, I'd like to ask the panel what Kim Ogg position will be if Jeff Sessions comes down against this new rule, or Governor Abbott comes down against this new rule. Are we going to suffer any kind of diminishment in federal funds or government funds because of this?
That's a great question. You know, it's interesting because, of course, Governor Abbott yanked the funding for the Travis County Jail when they refused to comply with the ICE orders. So it's definitely a possibility that you could see funding yanked. I mean, would the governor have enough gall when he's coming up for re-election in 2018 to yank funding from the largest county in the state on something?
Isn't he busy advocating for bathroom ordinances? I mean, I don't know if this is...
Yeah, which is another stupid thing.
But I mean, isn't he too preoccupied with that?
I mean, I know Jeff Sessions has come out back in the 80s and 90s, talked about the demon weed and all that kind of thing, but I don't think the Trump administration is focused on marijuana. I think a reasonable percentage of the Trump's voting base is users of marijuana.
Right.
And I think that he ran on beating up on immigrants. He didn't run on beating up on pot users.
Well, yeah.
So I don't think it's going to be a priority.
No, I agree. I don't think Sessions. I think Sessions and the Trump administration, their priority is immigration. It ain't gonna be dope smokers. You know, I mean, that's just not their thing. They could care less about that.
Mexican dope smokers.
Well, yeah, that's
problem.
right.
Big problem.
Whole different thing.
Whole different thing. Is it? Oh, so what says you? Have you heard anything about that? Like with your connections, how's Colorado kind of feeling about this?
It's all a big mystery right now. We don't know what Sessions is going to do. Some people think that he's going to come down on certain aspects of the industry. Some people think it's not going to be much of an issue. We just don't know one way or the other right now. What
says you guys? What do you think?
I honestly think Jeff Sessions has bigger fish to fry. I don't think this is high on the list. I mean, they've spoken some about the heroin epidemic, so maybe there'll be some action on that. But I don't think marijuana's as much on the radar.
Opioids, it's horrible. People dying every day from them.
Yeah.
So
let's circle back to what your mention of the better use of the $26 million. Some people would say let's throw it into NRG Stadium so we can have another Super Bowl.
Right.
Other people would say let's throw it into fixing the problems at the Harris County Jail or some infrastructure problems. But like you referenced, Julio, we spoke last week about the jail problems and the bail bond lawsuit and everything. And there was a lawyer, Gardier Wynn and Sue, who was hired by the county to represent them in the bail lawsuit in front of Judge Lee Rosenthal. And he had the audacity to go into court and argue to Judge Rosenthal that some people just want to stay in jail, and that's why they're not making bonds. Well, this week, Senators Whitmire and Ellis, they got together and said, you know what, this is offensive, and they do not want the county paying for a lawyer that is going to advocate and advance those kind of arguments. They came out strongly against it. I haven't seen anything since their press conference. Do we know, has he been officially relieved of his duties in representing Harris County or not?
I haven't heard anything about him getting canned or anything, but I read the brief because in the article about it says, he referenced this argument in his brief. And he kind of does. He says that there are some people who may want to sit in jail so they can see the magistrate or the judge in the morning, which I've dealt with a lot of people in jail, and there's not a one of them that's ever wanted to, I'll just hang out and talk to the judge.
Yeah.
It smacks of someone who's never met someone who's been charged with a crime, never talked to someone in Harris County Jail, doesn't really know anything about the process. The brief, of course, was beautifully written. It was a probably a $10,000 brief, honestly.
Probably more than that.
Yeah, probably more. But it was written by people who have no idea how the system works. They're probably going to win the brief because it was actually about challenging the sufficiency of a temporary injunction, and the proof is a little light. But the arguments they make just clearly say, we don't know anything about this. We're just using federal law here and doing what we can with it.
We're just super rich and super overpaid.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that they really are going to prevail on this at the end of the day. I mean, you've got a sheriff who's already come out, and he's basically taken a counter position. He says, look, it needs to be changed. I mean, how when you have the person who's being sued, who's now the named party in the lawsuit, is actually advocating for the plaintiffs?
So I think
it's not going to go well.
Yeah, the piece of pleading that he drafted that contained the argument was arguing against the issuance of a temporary injunction because of insufficient proof for that extraordinary remedy. So that's what I think they may win on. But I think you're right. Most of the stakeholders in Harris County recognize the jail's broken, and so I assume we're going to get some fixes. But
you think they'll win on that temporary injunction argument?
I'm not a federal lawyer, so I don't know for sure. But just reading the arguments, they're saying, there's a very high burden to prove that temporary injunction is the appropriate remedy. Because what you're saying with a temporary injunction is, hey, give us what we want in advance of us proving that we're right, and then we'll prove that we're right later.
Yeah.
So you got to show pretty good evidence that you're going to be right. It's hard.
And what's their position now? Okay, we get that, but what are they arguing?
So the only piece of pleadings I read was essentially that there's insufficient evidence to support the temporary injunction. I didn't read the full file on Pacer as to what their argument is. But one of their points is that the bonding schedule is not per se abusive, and that they allege that at PC court they really look at an individual's ability to pay, which again tells me they've never been to PC court because that does not happen. So they're basically arguing that they meet the constitutional standards this system does. And for a county as big as ours, they actually do a good job. That's what they're saying.
And what is the temporary injunction?
So the temporary injunction would be I believe they've asked to release everyone or review everyone for a PR bond who's got a misdemeanor, and with the eye towards releasing all of them.
Wow.
So it's a little much.
How wild would that be?
That's currently already occurring, actually.
That was my lead-in. Have you seen some of it down there already?
Actually, they have staff on call all weekend and all night long that interview defendants to see if they qualify for a personal bond, and then also to see if they can verify the address these people are going to go to. And I'm doing quite a bit of appointed work these days, and I'm getting a lot approved. It varies by judge, obviously, but I've been enjoying that ability to get these guys out of jail. And as the other defense lawyers here know, once your person's out of custody, you have a lot better chance of winning the case.
But we talk about this, and there just seems to be a number of ongoing problems. I mean, we had another death.
Yeah.
Another inmate hung himself.
People are dying in there.
Breakout of measles actually this week.
Yeah.
Another one?
Another breakout of measles.
Now, look, we had Ed Gonzalez on the program before the election, and I don't doubt his sincerity, and he's been on the job less than 60 days, so it's kind of hard to effectuate the changes you want to make. But, the problems are still persistent there. You still have the institutional problems that need to be solved with running the largest, the inmate who died in the mental health section, hung himself in the mental health section. So,
well, what we're seeing and what I know is going on is they're arresting not only because they're arresting victims of human trafficking, which we'll get into in a little bit later. They're also arresting homeless mental health patients and putting them in jail because they got nowhere else to go, and it's affecting them. It's the same kind of thing, and they're using this jail as a holding spot for all these other social ills and social problems.
It's a catch-all.
It's a catch-all. And I'm afraid with this new inmate processing center that it's just going to be this one revolving door where, guess what?
Yeah,
everybody goes to
but
jail.
You say, but well, let's see. I mean, let's take that back a little bit. I mean, if you're diverting all these Class A and Class B marijuana offenses, okay, and you're not bringing them down for the processing, does that help slow the process down over there? Does that help us? Does it realistically make the idea of having true bond hearings where you're assessing, if you've got less people coming through the system, is it realistic to think that something such as, not prosecuting Class A and Class B misdemeanors can actually solve the problems at the bonding level?
Well, I think that part of the problem is the bond, but some of the people that are held in there that are then later mistreated are being held for legitimate reasons on bond. They can't make their bond, they're charged with some kind of offense. Problem is, once you're in there, the conditions really are pretty bad.
Oh, they're
I think most people arrested for marijuana are getting right out or getting out shortly. So they're probably not the ones that are clogging it up. So maybe if we can save $26 million, the people that are detained for a long period.
Yeah, but I mean, it's still, if you get caught in Harris County, you're in for 12 hours.
And you might
The
die.
the average for a marijuana
A lot can happen in
offender,
12 hours.
Sure.
The average for a marijuana offender is about 6 days. So they're actually staying in there
believe that.
Really?
several days.
I did not know that.
But is that lumped
Well, that's
into
going to be
felonies
brought
and
up by the
misdemeanors
first degree
together?
felony stuff.
It takes at least 3 days for an individual to finally get to see me behind the glass in a misdemeanor court. It takes at least 3 days. And so maybe more in the appropriate circumstance. At least 3.
I think the goal of it, one of the goals of it, is to free up administrative costs with processing and all of that. So hopefully what we'll see is a better use of resources all across the board.
Maybe we can pay the jailers more, because I'm sure Julio can talk about it too, and maybe Erik too. Anybody that's been down to see their client at the jail is going to go through a tedious, terrible process.
Unless you go to 701. I was at 701 the other day. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't anything compared to Baker Street.
Well, I will say that you are in the minority of good experiences, because...
Oh, no. Don't get me wrong. Over at Baker Street and Little Baker, it's terrible. But I'm talking about 701 San Jacinto. It's not as bad over there.
I've had just as bad luck.
Really?
So maybe it's just me that's unlucky.
It just seems to me that the system is super underfunded. I mean, I'm sure we've all met with clients in the, quote unquote conference room, which is like the most rundown closet in the jail that they give to the defense lawyers. And universally, the facilities there are of that quality. So they don't have money for anything over there. I think they're barely paying to keep these guys fed. And if you talk to them, the lunches over there are pretty terrible.
Yeah.
So I think that the system, if we can save $26 million, we ought to pour it back into mental health treatment and diversion programs and things for these people to do and be better. And that's a great way to clear up our jails.
What I have seen, going back to what Alan was saying, is I have seen a less arrest increase of marijuana as I have in the last month, really 6 months, when the whole change was happening. But I have, instead of getting 2 or 3 marijuana cases, I'm getting 2 or 3 trespasses instead. So what I am seeing, at least initially, is that the officers are not arresting the marijuanas as much anymore, because I'm still getting them, but they're arresting the trespasses, the other driving while license invalids, or the other smaller offenses. And it's almost like you grab or you clear one end of the balloon and then something else kind of pops up. And I think it's a problem that is, the jail population is a problem that's beyond marijuana. I think it's a first step, but I think there's other issues that need to be resolved.
Let's hop on the phone lines again. Take another call. Hello. Thanks for calling Reasonable Doubt.
Yeah, I'd like to ask JV why it takes so long for him to see his clients. 3 days. If I'm arrested and I go to Reasoner Street, I can get out before I can go to county. If I get a hold of my bondsman, why can't he get me out at Reasoner Street before I need a bondsman? And then if I go down to the county, it's going to be 3 days according to him. Why can't he meet me at Reasoner Street?
Great question. Because you don't always get taken to Reasoner.
Right.
If you're not arrested by HPD, you're not getting taken to Reasoner.
Most arrests are by HPD, though.
What?
Most arrests are by HPD.
No, I'd say the sheriff's office and HPD are probably equal on arrests.
You're talking all the sheriff's office,
constables,
precincts,
yeah.
all the constables. I mean, you're talking
you got Pasadena, you got all the villages police. I mean, you've got a number of people.
But my question is still, why do the attorneys necessarily go to the rear of the line when when the connection should be between the defendant and the attorney rather than the defendant, the bondsman, and the attorney?
I'll provide some perspective, and if you guys can chime in, you can share a similar result or different. So,
Thank-
yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks for the
Great
call.
question. For the longest time, the jail has been so crowded that it's been one in and one out. So 2 people get released, 2 people come in. So while that individual is out on the streets, officers pull him over for whatever reason, he gets arrested. His journey from arrest to, assuming he's city jail or precinct jail or some of the other jails, from there to county, that initial zone is a mystery zone because they don't know where he's at. Somebody calls in, where is he? He's still in transferring. Last we saw, he was out in precinct 4. Okay, call precinct 4. Call. His location isn't known yet. Boom. Okay, fine. He finally hit some processing center. We know where he's at. Go post a bond. They go post a bond. And typically, it could take anywhere from 0 to 24 hours. In the holdover, clients are telling me, clients are showing up to the holdover already posted bond, already bond posted and done and should be out. But in that scenario, because the paperwork from the bonding company to find the individual and to locate him, and by the time they get to the Harris County, the person's already hit and it's been 2 or 3 days and that bond is still floating out there somewhere. And that is the experience that I have had. There's this Bermuda Triangle or mystery zone from the time the individual gets arrested till he gets to jail, because the jail is so packed. It's this one in, one out policy, one in, one out, and it's causing backlogs, an individual to get lost in the system, is my opinion.
Yeah, and part of what the caller said is, when I'm arrested at Reasoner, why can't my lawyer come down and get me? Well, maybe your lawyer could, but most people who get arrested don't know, I need to have a lawyer. This is my lawyer, let me call him. Most people that get arrested say, oh crap, I need a lawyer, how do I find one? And the search starts when they're back in the free world and they can do it in a reasonable way. So I've had clients call me saying, hey, there's cops here, they're telling me I'm gonna get arrested. I say, okay, I'll be on my way down there, I'll help you out. Or we'll get our bondsman down there, we'll get you out faster. But most people don't know that they need that, 1 minute before they're put in jail.
Right. It's the very rare case. I mean, that you get that. I mean, I've probably had more than most people because I've had a lot of experiences where they're holding you, where HPD will be part of a task force, like an FDA task force or some other task force, where they're trying to see if the feds will take charges. So they're holding them at Reasoner while they're calling the feds. Meanwhile, the wife knows what's going on, and so she'll be able to get on the phone, call the lawyer, and I'm sitting over at one of the bonding offices, going back and forth between crossing the street, going back and forth to Reasoner, and I've got him, I'm talking to the police and saying, hold on, we're getting the bond. If you can just not put him on the bus
elevator,
over.
yeah.
Well, on the bus over, on the next bus over, we're processing the bond. And usually, if you can do that, yeah. I mean, the cops that over at Reasoner, they're cool. They're like, yeah, we'll cast him over, make sure he doesn't get on the bus. You treat people nice, they treat you the same way. So if you try to make friends with them,
And what does that take?
It just takes kindness, honestly.
Well, I mean, before you show up to Reasoner, we know there's going to be some expectation of payment. Most people,
For you.
Yeah,
For you.
Yeah.
Well, I was saying for you, but I mean, we're talking about poor.
This isn't Madam Morris.
Right.
Come on.
Right.
Well, no, but I think JV brings up a good point, is that most people don't have the wherewithal to call a fancy lawyer like me or like you or like anybody else and have you run back and forth across the street, because that's not cheap.
Well, but most of the
chase
scenarios
something
but most of the scenarios don't play out that way either, is what I'm saying. And to answer the caller's question a little more, the way most of the scenarios work out is you're only at Reasoner a short period of time. If you're there for a DWI case, you're in their custody to do all the field sobriety tests and do the video and take the blood. They're not letting you hang around Reasoner. You're getting out, unless by some chance you just get the stars to align that, somebody was with you in the car.
You got to be on it.
You got to be on it. I mean, the cases where I've gotten it is where there is a huge lag time because they're trying to see if the feds will take the charge, or they're waiting for something else. You know, if there's an intox manslaughter case where there was a long scene investigation, and so they, you know, by then the defendant has called you, or his family member has been able to make a call to you. They know they're being taken downtown, and so, you know, the wreck may have occurred at 2 a.m., but you have a 3-hour lag time because you know they're not being transported to Reasoner even until 5 a.m. to do the preliminary. So it's those cases where there's that huge lag time, either in getting them to Reasoner, or they get to Reasoner and they're trying to get charges filed somewhere else, because as you know, they're not going to take them to Harris County until the charge is actually filed.
Right.
Right?
Right. And so and then once you miss that window,
Right.
you're in transport.
Exactly.
He's in processing.
Yeah.
He's not
Processing.
coming out.
It's like this nebulous area that nobody really knows what happens there. And even like you said, if the bond's posted, they can't get out. And I've had a similar experience, you know, being appointed to somebody and they say, hey, I made bond. I'm just here still. And
Right.
It's like this 16-hour delay. And I think in Montgomery County, it's even worse.
Can be. They can get them out pretty quick too. And the other thing to note is this is if you are arrested at the scene. Because very often people will have a warrant out for their arrest, they don't know about it. Sometimes the first thing they get is a call from a sheriff's deputy or detective saying, hey, we got a warrant, you want to come on down. If that happens, we can do a lot more for you. We can make the process a lot smoother. But it's these, you get pulled over on the side of the road and then you're put in cuffs, that the information lag is just so long that usually we miss our window to do anything about it.
And then your phone's not on. You're getting arrested. You can't make a call. You're stuck.
But you know what? But I will be. There's no. It's not like a problem that's unique to Harris County. I mean,
Right.
there are a lot of, you know, other counties and even the feds. They have the same problem. I mean, there can be a delay that they will hold somebody in custody till they have their detention hearing, until they're able to hire counsel. They'll appoint a counsel in the meantime. But you know, if somebody says I need time to hire a lawyer. I want to hire a lawyer. Well, guess what? I'm not letting you out until you, you know.
Or in the interim.
It happens.
Or in the interim, just arrest him. Arrest the trafficked and the mentally ill and the poor. Put them in jail until we can figure out what to do with them.
Yeah.
We didn't get to that article.
We didn't.
It's a great article.
We'll have to save that for next week because we only got 30 seconds left. Man, time flies with a full panel.
Yeah.
It just flew right on by. Great to have you guys on the show this week. Really appreciate you guys coming down.
Thanks for having us.
Jason, I'm sure we're going to try and get you on again because this is
it's great to be here.
Yeah, we can see how
not
this
the
pans out.
last go round, I'm sure, with the marijuana. I'm sure there's going to be a ton more criticism once the policy actually starts to get instituted from perhaps the people up north. Who knows? But anyway, that's all the time we have, ladies and gentlemen. It was a great show this week. I want to thank our guests, Jason Miller, Alan Macias, and Erik Nelson. Appreciate you guys being on. For my co-host, Julio Vela, I'm Jimmy Ardwan, and we will see you next week for another new episode of HCCLA's Reasonable Doubt. Good night.